Hello and welcome. Today I'm going to look at some new intersection configurations and advanced one-way traffic systems using cities' skylines. Now, to be clear, I'm not talking about regular one-way systems. The type, where on half of the east-west streets traffic flows from east to west, and on the other half traffic flows from west to east, and the same for north-south. So it turns out there's actually a much better way to arrange your one-way traffic. To explain these ideas, first I'm going to talk through what I learned from looking at one-way traffic in things like hexagonal and octagonal one-way city grids, and then bring these ideas over to rectangular grids. The pivotal concept for doing this is a new four-way intersection configuration that I call the Double-T Junction. Next, I look at ways to configure these intersections to allow traffic to flow freely through cities with very little need to stop. After that, I look at variations on the Double-T Junctions, and then the type of grids that these variations could give rise to. Next, I look at applying the same ideas to six-way intersections and their resulting city grids. And the same idea for eight-way intersections and their resulting city grids. Finally then, I take a look at what you can get when you combine a few of these different ideas together. Right, my demonstration city that you're looking at here contains a bunch of different areas, and I'm going to use each area to illustrate one or more ideas. So I'm going to begin here. This area has an ad hoc one-way system, but it's not like a one-way system that you'd find in the real world. If you look more closely, you'll see that all of the intersections are three-way intersections, so three roads. So it's either going to be two roads into an intersection and one road out, or one road into an intersection and two roads out. You can see that if I show the lane connectors here. You can see this kind of intersection here where we have the road splitting basically into two different roads. We have 2 lanes coming in and 4 lanes coming out. There's no chance for traffic congestion here. But in the other type of intersection that we have in this area, we have 4 lanes merging into 2 lanes, so there's potential for traffic congestion with this type of intersection. So the traffic in this area runs quite well, but that's not by accident. In the beginning I had far fewer roads and the traffic started to back up at some of the merging intersections. So to fix the problem I added a few extra link roads, but that of course just shifted the problem to a different intersection, so I added even more roads and to fix those problems and so on. Pretty soon I saw a pattern in the new roads that I was adding. Essentially, I was balancing the road network by having roughly the same number of roads going from east to west as there were going from west to east, and the same for north-south. So the road network needs a degree of symmetry. So for the next area, I was going to start out with a symmetrical pattern to begin with. And the approach of using just one-way T-junctions and small roads, that seems pretty good, so I'm going to carry on using that and see if I can improve upon it. Now, before I move on to the next area, There's one more thing I'd like to mention. I'm not going to talk about things like traffic lights in this video. I'll cover the impact of traffic lights on certain one-way grids in some other videos that I hope to make. But for now, I'm just going to leave all the intersections with pedestrian crossings. Also, if anyone has any questions on this type of stuff, just ask in the comment section. I'm going to be presenting a lot of new ideas here, and I've no idea how these ideas are going to be received or what questions people are going to have. So when I get time, I plan to pick the highest rated questions and do my best to answer them with a video response. So the first type of symmetrical pattern that I looked at was a spiral with one road in and one road out. Now that's what this area started out as. I have the original version of that area up here. So it started out like this, as a spiral with one road in, spiraling around, and then one road out. Now that did not work so well, because as the area expanded, the distance from the outer edge to the center became longer and longer. With more and more buildings, the traffic started to build up. So it had more traffic than it could handle on that single road, and it was taking too long for the vehicles to get to the center and back. So I ended up putting in shortcuts and more shortcuts. Again, I ended up balancing the shortcuts. For every north shortcut I added a south, for every east I had to add a west. So balance and symmetry alone is not enough. You also can't get away without having many intersections to reduce your traffic. The intersections just need to be efficient and hopefully distribute the traffic evenly. So I started looking at small scale repeating patterns, or tiling patterns. Naturally, of course, the first tiled pattern that came to mind is the hexagon. We have one up here. So the first thing to do with a tiling pattern is choose a tile size. And that goes for any kind of grid, square, rectangular, etc. Now here I've used quite small hexagons, so I'm trying to fit as many buildings in the middle as possible to kind of keep the traffic levels high. So, and also another thing, the road size is another variable that we can experiment with, but here and in some of the other patterns I look at, I mostly stick to 2-lane roads. Now, these hexagonal cities look really cool, but there's a problem when you try to make one-way traffic patterns in these types of cities. You can't just have the traffic move clockwise around one hexagon and counterclockwise around the neighboring hexagons, because that pattern won't work. But if you look here, there is a pattern you can use. I've detailed it up here. So C here stands for clockwise, so if I move to the traffic view, the traffic moves clockwise around all these C's, around this one, and counterclockwise around the A's, counterclockwise, A's. And then on the ones that are not labeled, we have either merging or diverging traffic. So with this kind of pattern, you build up a nice kind of fairly free-flowing grid without too many merges, without too many diverges, and the traffic flows pretty well in this kind of city. So, like the Ad-hoc and the other spiral type grid, we just have a series of merges and diverges, but here they're pretty well evenly distributed. Like a car passing here will go, that's a diverge, then they merge here, and then they diverge here, and then they merge here, and then the roads diverge here, and they merge again here. So it's very well distributed like that, and the resulting traffic is pretty good. But I wasn't quite happy with that, so I wanted more, as they say. So I moved on to the next pattern. And the next pattern for me is the octagon, which I have over here. I'll go down to this blank area. Now, organizing the one-way traffic flow system with octagons is more straightforward than with hexagons. You can see you set the traffic traveling around one octagon, say counterclockwise, say like this one, and then the traffic flows around all of its neighboring octagons clockwise. So with this one counterclockwise, this one is clockwise, this one is clockwise, 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 and then its neighbors are going to be counterclockwise again. So counterclockwise, counterclockwise. Now this gives us a nice balanced grid. We have roughly the same number of roads going from east to west as we do going from west to east. And unlike the hexagonal grid, the octagonal grid actually scales a bit better. But again, it's in the merging and diverging where it eventually goes wrong. Because like here we have 4 lanes merging into 2 lanes and then splitting out into 4 lanes again. So there's a lane mismatch there. Our lane mathematics, as we say, doesn't quite add up, because you can have too many lanes, too many roads trying to fit in, too many vehicles trying to fit in, not enough road space. So overall it's pretty good, but it's not quite traffic nirvana just yet. So next on my list of patterns to try was Pythagorean tiling. Now you might not be familiar with this, but deep down it's actually very similar to octagonal grids. So here we have traffic, say, moving around this square clockwise and this square, which neighbours that one, counterclockwise, and this other neighbour is also counterclockwise, and this other neighbour counterclockwise, and its neighbour over here counterclockwise, and the neighbours of that one are clockwise, 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 clockwise. So the pattern is actually very similar, but here we're using straight lines, right angles, no 45 degrees, so it's in use it's actually much more like a real world city. My next thought then was, can we shrink down this small square that we get with the Pythagorean grid and with the octagonal grid? Can we shrink that down, and what kind of grid would we get if we did that? Well, my first attempt looked a bit like this, so we have 2 lanes coming in and just a single lane going around the corner, as it were. So this is approaching a square grid, but we can do a bit more with this type of intersection. So with some more tinkering, I got this type of square grid. So with this grid we essentially have a new type of intersection. Now if I look at one here, get the lane connector. So we have 2 lanes entering from one direction and 2 lanes entering from the opposite direction, and the traffic leaves 2 lanes in both perpendicular directions. So as a shorthand I'm going to call this the Double-T Junction, so because it's a bit like having 2 specific one-way T junctions back to back. Now using this Double-T junction, each block shares a lot more road with its neighbours, so cars have much more opportunity to change lanes between intersections, much more so than they did in the octagonal grid. So, and the part of the road that's down to just a single lane is very short, so there's not much possibility for a single lane blockage to block up the entire road. So this arrangement allows traffic to flow through the intersection almost continuously, only having to stop occasionally or slow down for pedestrians. Well, why is that? It's down to the lane mathematics in this case. The number of lanes of traffic entering the intersection is 4, and the number of lanes leaving it is also 4. And drivers don't make a choice of where to go at the intersection itself. They make it on the road leading up to the intersection. Now, if I zoom out a bit and switch to the traffic view, we can see that the overall street layout is actually quite similar to the octagonal grid. If the traffic flows around one city block clockwise, then it flows around its neighbours counterclockwise, and the neighbours of those ones clockwise again. Clockwise. Now, for a shorthand going forward, I'm going to call this the Double-T grid. Now, the really interesting thing for me about the Double-T junction and grid is that with a bit of work, I think it could be applied to real-world cities. Now, I won't go into detail. Obviously, the way it is here, it's not going to work, but I'll go into this in detail in some other videos that I'm going to have a look at. And so, thinking about this on a high level now, it actually took me quite a while to reach this point, because I think that's because it takes a mental leap to get to having an intersection where you cannot go straight ahead. So that's unexpected, and it seems counterintuitive, but it actually works really well for the overall traffic flow of the city. And also, it tends to need a lot fewer lanes than other traffic systems, so we don't have any lane hierarchy here. Everything fits onto just small 2-lane roads, and the traffic is distributed around all the roads, so everybody has a kind of a unique start point and end point, and they rarely all merge together onto a single road and then split ahead onto smaller roads. That just doesn't happen here. All the traffic is distributed evenly among equally sized roads. So why exactly does this intersection work so well when you compare it with the intersections that we're used to? Again, I'm going to go into more in detail on this in my other videos, but I'll put up a quick infographic here to demonstrate the difference that this intersection can make. To start with, two-directional traffic at a four-way intersection, only a single lane of traffic can proceed at a time when traffic has a green light, and you need 4 separate green light phases, one for each direction. Now, a one-way system improves this considerably by allowing 2 lanes of traffic to pass through an intersection at a time, and you only need 2 green light phases for traffic. So the standard one-way system doubles the number of lanes and halves the number of traffic light phases, which is a considerable improvement, which is why these systems are used. Now, the Double-T junction then, it allows 4 lanes of traffic through the intersection at a time, and only needs 1 traffic light phase for vehicles. So it has also doubled the number of lanes for traffic above the normal one-way intersection, and it's halved the number of traffic light phases again. So it's the same kind of improvement on top of the one-way intersection that the one-way intersection was over the standard two-directional intersection. Again, I'll go into more detail on this in my other videos, but I thought that was important to point out here. But I'll move on now from the basic Double-T grid, because I did have a few further ideas that were worth exploring. There are more patterns that can use a Double-T grid like this one. With this kind of arrangement, all of the intersections are free-flowing Double-T junctions. We also have a balanced grid. But something like this is not really new design. It's just a special case of the Double-T grid with some blocks excluded or maybe pedestrianized. You can clearly see that if I add a few roads back in. So if I add a road in here, I've just turned it back into the Double-T grid, really. So after this, I had a look into what would happen if you change the angles of the Double-T junction. What kind of grids could you come up with? And there are some pretty interesting designs, I think. Now this one here uses non-right angle T junctions, or Double-T junctions. So again, this is a T-junction, but it's not at exactly 90 degrees, and you can arrange it in a nice hexagon pattern with traffic spiraling in and spiraling out towards the center. And after that, there's some other designs that use hexagons and triangles that also can make use of the Double-T junction. Now, I'm sure there are more patterns that could be found, but these are just two of the nicer looking and fairly free-flowing versions that I've looked into. Now, just a small aside here to keep things brief, but I've restricted this video to mostly straight road configurations. But you can use curved roads with Double-T junctions. If I zoom in here, you can see I have curved road, Double-T junctions, and this section here is just a one-way section. Traffic can make its way easily to the end without blocking intersections and then easily back, and they can turn around at any point. Now, I won't say much more about this here, but there's a lot more grid configurations possible if you consider curved roads. It's just not particularly practical for the real world, but possibly for suburban areas. Now, next on my list of things to look at were can we do anything with six-way intersections, and what kind of grids arise from that? So, do we have an equivalent of the Double-T junction for six-way intersections? It turns out we do. Let's zoom in to say this one here. So this intersection here has three different roads leading into it. This one, and this one. And three leaving the intersection, this road, and this road. So we also don't have any lanes crossing each other. Now, the first city that I built with these intersections, the traffic didn't flow very well because there was a lot of zigzagging that the traffic would have to do. But it turns out I was missing a trick in that with this type of intersection, we can actually have a straight through direction. So if we look here, traffic approaches from this way, it can also go straight through without blocking any of the other roads. So this would allow traffic to get across the city in one direction quite easily. Now the trick is then, how do you get them back? So if you have a few wide junctions here, we have, 4 lanes going straight through the intersection. We can build up a pattern where traffic can get around a city quite quickly and quite easily without having to stop. So, after seeing this pattern build up, I immediately thought, of course, is there something you can do with 8-way intersections, with 8 roads leading to an intersection? Do we have a similar pattern for those kind of intersections? It turns out we do. And it looks, say, a bit like this. Now we have 4 lanes leading to the intersection and 4 lanes leading away. And we also have, in this case, 2 straight through directions, which allow traffic to flow across the city really well. So I've called this one a Quadruple-T junction, whereas kind of with the 6 roads, that I call that a Triple-T junction. So there's a lot of different options for laying out a city, and I've gone with a basic one here where I have Double-T junctions and Quadruple-T junctions interspersed, and that works pretty well. But there are other options too, like over here, if you get some of the roads to curve back on themselves, you can have, say, traffic flowing from this intersection to this and another road going back in the opposite direction from this intersection back to this intersection without the traffic having to slow down at the intersections. Let's look at a better example of that. Yeah. These ones where I have it marked out. So traffic can start here, go through this intersection here, go through this intersection across to here without having to slow down. And similarly, traffic can go in the opposite direction from here through this intersection all the way up to here without having to stop for other traffic. So what's next? Well, we can go one step further than these type of intersections. We can have a hybrid of multiple different types of these free-flowing intersections, like this one here. This grid is a hybrid of 6-way intersections, and so 6-way Triple-T Junction intersections and the normal 4-way Double-T Junction intersections. And using this type of grid, we can have traffic moving without stopping in this direction across the city, and then another direction moving backwards, and then in between and surrounding those we can have Double-T Junctions. Now, I've only really scratched the surface of these. I've only tried a small bunch of these different triple or hybrid grids, as I call them, but I'd be really interested to see what other people can come up with when they mix and match between a few of these different free-flowing intersection concepts. Okay, so I'm going to start wrapping up this video now. I've gone through everything I've really wanted to cover, and I really hope a few people manage to get to the end of this journey. Like, I've had a bunch of different ideas for this video. Like, initially I was going to cover some of the ideas, some of the grids that didn't work, where the traffic just wouldn't work properly, but there was too many of those ideas to come up to choose from, and it would have made this video far too long. So my point is that if somebody's out there and they try to come up with their own type of new grid or hybrid grid and it doesn't work straight away, then it's going to take a few goes. It's not something that's obvious. I've had to play around with these things to make things work. So these Double-T and Triple-T intersections, they're a building block essentially, and with any kind of new building block or tool, it can take a few goes to get the hang of them. It takes a bit of practice, a bit of use to make sure that they work properly. So I think I've mentioned this before, but it took me a long time, a lot of steps to come up with these ideas for advanced one-way systems. And I think it's down to the counterintuitive design of the Double-T Junction. It just feels wrong, but it works really well. So when you put them together properly in a grid, and you don't do silly things like have roads that are too wide, like 4-lane roads I found, or 6-lane roads, don't really work with these Double-T Junctions, because traffic ends up having to cross far too many lanes, and it's just not needed. 2 lanes is sufficient when traffic is not being held up at any point. So things like that are counterintuitive. People are going to have trouble making these things work initially, but with some practice and some use, just playing around with them, you get the hang of them. It's not like I've said, it's not intuitive. It's a new tool. You're going to have to learn the ins and outs, to relearn intuition to get these things to work properly. Okay, right, I suppose I should mention I'm going to try to have some other videos that are specifically going to focus on the Double-T Junction or on real world cities, and have a look out for those videos. I'm not sure if I'm going to put them up before or after this one, but they'll be there at some stage, and check those out if you want more details of like how to make a Double-T junction safe for real world use. That's an interesting topic in and of itself. So I think that's basically it. So thanks for watching. Do the usual YouTube stuff if you want to see more videos, and hopefully I'll catch you on one of the next ones.